Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a world where the tap just runs dry. Not in some, far-off dystopia, but maybe closer than we think, here now. What if that fundamental thing, clean water, just wasn't guaranteed anymore? It's an unsettling thought, isn't it?
It is, and what's really fascinating looking at the material we're diving into is how it weaves together different threads. You've got like historical accounts, modern scientific reports,
Right.
and they all seem to point towards one pretty urgent conclusion. A potential mega drought, something that, according to this perspective, could totally redefine how we think about water.
And it's framed as more than just, bad weather.
Oh, definitely. More than just an environmental challenge.
Absolutely. So our goal here in this deep dive is to really explore these claims about a looming water crisis as they're presented. We'll look at a very personal story someone apparently went through.
Yeah, that part's quite striking.
And then dig into this proposed solution for, well, self-sufficiency. It's all drawn straight from the material we've got. Look, this isn't about trying to scare anyone.
No, not at all.
It's about getting informed, understanding the perspective being put forward, and thinking about preparedness. So let's start with the dramatic stage that's set right at the beginning. This idea that America is facing something more than just a drought. It's called a reckoning.
That's the term used, yeah.
And it claims, pretty boldly, that ancient prophets talked about this, and now NASA, of all organizations, is supposedly confirming it. That's quite an opener.
It is a strong claim. The material definitely leans into that. It talks about NASA predicting a 100-year mega drought.
100 years.
Yeah, and explicitly saying it'll be worse, potentially much worse than the Dust Bowl back in the 1930s.
Wow.
And it suggests the droughts we've seen over the last, say, 6 years or so. That was just the warm-up.
Just the beginning.
Right, now it's supposedly spreading. And a core argument is that as a society, we are just completely unprepared for this kind of disruption to our water access, our whole way of life, really. And connecting back to what you said, it explicitly links this to a spiritual context. It says, Scripture had another name for it, famine. It even draws a parallel to, like, Pharaoh needing Joseph's help in the Bible during that massive famine.
That's a really potent mix, NAS predictions side by side with biblical famine. But it seems the framing gets even more intense.
It does. Yeah, the material introduces some pretty apocalyptic elements. There's talk of the second seal from Revelation being opened.
Revelation. Okay.
Yeah, Revelation 6.4 specifically mentioning war. It talks about the red horse rides and connects it to current events, mentioning nations rising against nations, Israel under siege, China watching, Russia moving, that kind of geopolitical tension.
So weaves contemporary anxieties into this prophetic framework.
Exactly. And the conclusion it draws is incredibly stark.
Mm-hmm.
War has arrived, famine is here, and thirst is coming. It's definitely painting a vivid and frankly alarming picture.
No kidding. So stepping back a bit, how does it detail the actual, physical water crisis side of things, beyond the predictions?
Right. Well, it points to specific examples. Things like Lake Mead being at its lowest level since the 1930s.
I've seen headlines about that.
Yeah, and it claims water bodies in California are drying up faster than they can possibly refill. Even Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake,
Huge, yeah.
is reportedly at its lowest in over 80 years. And maybe the most concerning one mentioned is the Ogala Aquifer.
That's the big underground one, right? Under the Great Plains.
That's the one, vital for agriculture. And the material claims it's disappearing, with this really severe warning, once it's gone, that's it.
You can't just refill it.
You don't refill the Ogala, you just run dry. That's the quote. It keeps coming back to the Dust Bowl comparison, but always adds, now it's happening again, only worse.
And it tries to lend weight to this by citing other sources.
Yeah, it mentions the UN and the New York Times, claiming they've also said this is only just beginning. And again, it anchors this in Scripture, referencing Deuteronomy 11.17 about divine anger leading to the heavens shutting up, no rain, and people perishing. It adds this layer of, historical and spiritual weight.
So the overarching message seems to be, these aren't just random weather events. They're signs of a much deeper shift. And the implication is you need to get ready now.
Precisely. That's the core thrust. The density of these claims, linking science, prophecy, and current events, is really something.
Okay, so we have these broad, kind of alarming warnings. But what really makes this hit home, I think, is the personal story that's included.
Right. The shift from the macro to the micro.
Exactly. It introduces us to this man, John Gilmore,
Yeah.
living off-grid in Arizona, apparently, and he supposedly came face-to-face with this exact crisis.
Yeah, his story is presented as a sort of case study. He's got 5 acres, grows food, has chickens, the whole self-sufficient setup, relied on his own well 90 feet deep, always worked fine before.
Until
Until it didn't. He starts noticing the signs, water pressure dropping, the faucets sputtering.
that sinking feeling.
Yeah. And then the moment of truth, he goes to his hand pump, pulls the lever, and apparently nothing came out but a dusty cough.
Wow. Just dry.
Just dry. Now, he apparently had about 500 gallons stockpiled, so they weren't immediately without water, but they had to start rationing instantly. His wife was reportedly washing clothes with vinegar and gray water.
Desperate measures.
And to top it off, when he looked into drilling a new, deeper well, he found out there was a 5-month wait just for the permit.
5 months when your well is dry now.
Exactly. Talk about pressure.
That's immediate, intense pressure. But then something even more dramatic happens, right? It's something that really shifted his whole perspective.
That's how it's framed, yeah. It was apparently 2:14 in the morning. He hears a noise outside his house,
Middle of the night,
goes out and finds 2 men just taking his water barrels, the ones he had stockpiled.
stealing his emergency water.
Right. And the chilling part is how calm they supposedly were. One of them reportedly just says, "Sorry, pal, we're taking your water," like it's perfectly normal.
That's terrifying.
And then, according to the account, they attack him. He gets hit on the head, wakes up later in the hospital.
Oh, my
And
God.
the only thing missing, just the water. Nothing else was touched.
Just the water.
And this experience, the story goes, led him to this profound realization. It wasn't just about weather or climate change or politics or broken systems. He called it a shaking.
By shaking.
Yeah. He felt like we've entered a wilderness season, and the material then brings in the analogy of the ant from Proverbs, the whole store up your provisions in summer idea, preparedness.
That experience.
Yeah.
Wow. It really puts a human face on those abstract warnings, doesn't it? Makes you think, if things really got that bad, what does real self-reliance look like?
Exactly. It highlights the stark shift from relying on, the grid or easily accessible resources to needing something much more independent. It ties right into this idea of righteous provision that the material talks about.
Okay, so John has this terrifying experience. His well is dry. The system seems broken. He needs a completely new solution. Where does he turn?
Well, the narrative says he started praying for wisdom, reaching out to his network, his off-grid contacts, and the breakthrough, supposedly, came from an old friend from his church, a former military guy.
Yeah, military tech often finds its way into civilian life.
Seems like it. This friend told him about, quote, a quiet innovation developed by the Israeli military, designed for soldiers deep in the desert.
Okay, makes sense. What does it do?
It's a device that literally pulls fresh, clean water out of thin air through condensation.
Like a dehumidifier, but for drinking water?
Yeah. Essentially, yeah, but optimized for producing potable water efficiently. Think about how a cold glass gets wet on a humid day. It's that principle. This device creates the right conditions for water vapor in the air to condense into liquid water.
Pulling water from the air itself.
Exactly. The description emphasizes its simplicity. No pipes, no infrastructure, no noise. It's presented as harnessing a natural process, and they call it Joseph's Well.
Joseph's Well. Why that name?
The material links it to Joseph the carpenter from the Bible, the one who listened to God's warning, quietly took Mary and Jesus to safety in Egypt.
The protector, the provider.
Right. The idea is he obeyed and made sure they had water, shelter, safety. So this device is framed in that same spirit of quiet, faithful provision.
That's a powerful connection they're drawing. But okay, Israeli military tech? Sounds expensive. Was it something he could just buy?
Well, that was the problem. He looked into commercial versions, atmospheric water generators, and the source claims greedy corporations were charging thousands, like $6,000, $8,000, even $10,000.
Way out of reach for most people, especially someone already struggling.
Exactly. So that led John to think, wait a minute, maybe I can build one myself. Reverse engineer the basic concept, use readily available parts, make his own version.
A DIY approach.
Yeah. His thinking was, it pulls water from air, it's quiet, it could work on or off the grid. It positions this individual ingenuity, this kind of hacker mindset almost, as the answer when the big systems fail or become too expensive.
So how did he actually go about building it? Did he have an engineering background?
No, he explicitly says he's no engineer, just relied on his tools and practical experience. He reportedly started scavenging parts.
Scavenging. From what?
Things like an old dehumidifier, a broken mini fridge, just scraps he had lying around his barn.
Resourceful.
Very. But it wasn't easy. The account mentions struggles burning out wiring, cracking a coolant coil. He apparently almost gave up.
I bet. That sounds frustrating.
Yeah, but the story says inspiration from his family and thinking about Joseph the carpenter kept him pushing. And crucially, he got help from an old buddy who used to repair commercial coolers.
Ah, someone with relevant expertise.
Right, that seemed to be key. And then finally, success. That moment is described really vividly. The first soft drip into the collection tank.
Water.
Water. Cold, clean, drinkable water, apparently straight from the air. His wife's emotional reaction is mentioned as confirmation, the sheer relief.
I can only imagine. And how did his DIY version compare to those expensive commercial ones?
Well, it's described as being smaller and simpler, but still producing more than enough for drinking, cooking, washing, and light storage. Enough for their daily needs.
And the cost, that's the big question.
That's the kicker. Reportedly, it cost him less than $150 to build.
$150 compared to thousands.
That's the claim. And running costs were apparently minimal, too, less than 10 cents an hour. It brought him immense peace of mind, the story says, and he realized this wasn't just for him, it could help others.
That's incredible if true. But running it still requires electricity, right?
Yeah.
What about being truly off-grid?
Good point. That was the next step. He wanted full independence. So again, he consulted his off-grid friends, and he apparently figured out how to run the whole thing using just a basic car battery and a small solar panel.
Solar-powered water from air.
Bingo. No noise, no wires, no bills. Total self-reliance. And again, the emphasis is on simplicity. No special tools, no rare parts. No engineering degree required.
So the message is this ultimate self-reliance is actually achievable.
That's definitely the core message, yeah. It connects back to that theme of resilience in the face of uncertainty.
Okay, so John builds this thing, gets it working off-grid. How does it get shared? Did he just tell his friends?
Pretty much, yeah. Word started spreading among his neighbors, his church community. People were interested, maybe even desperate.
I can see why.
And his wife apparently suggested, honey, maybe this is your ministry, sharing this knowledge.
So he decided to document it.
Exactly. He decided to create a guide. Document the whole process step by step. Made videos, printable blueprints, schematics, all designed, as he puts it, for real people, not engineers.
Making it accessible. What's actually in this guide package?
It sounds pretty comprehensive based on the description. The core guide includes the step-by-step video instructions, the blueprints and schematics you can print out, a full materials list with links on where to source parts.
Okay, practical stuff.
Very practical. Instructions for powering it both on-grid and off-grid with solar. And apparently he offers unlimited personal email support if you buy the guide.
That's quite a commitment. Are there extras too?
Yeah, there are 3 bonus guides mentioned. Bonus number 1 is how to secure your water reserves, covers storage, containers, rotation, keeping it from getting contaminated.
It's important if you're stockpiling.
Definitely. Bonus 2 is how to purify and mineralize water. So other methods like filtration, using the sun for disinfection, boiling, and even how to add minerals back into purified water.
Okay, covering all the bases.
And bonus 3 is called the deadly agents hidden in your water. This one apparently exposes chemicals, pharmaceuticals, bacteria found in tap water. It even mentions spiritual toxins, which seems to relate to negative influences or ideologies potentially spread through public systems, and how to protect against them.
Wow, that last one sounds intense. Spiritual toxins.
Yeah, it broadens the scope significantly, framing even water quality in moral or spiritual terms, consistent with the overall tone.
And does the material offer any proof that this guide actually works for people, like testimonials?
It does include a few. There's an Adam B. from Missouri who supposedly built it in 2 days, claimed he had no handyman skills, and now feels no bills, no fear, just peace.
Sounds ideal.
There's a Lena R. from Texas who was skeptical at first but says it actually worked. Cold, clean water from the air, and she hasn't bought bottled water in over a month, apparently. And a Deacon Mark C. from Arizona, described as a friend of John's who built one and feels it gives him a sense of purpose, to protect and to provide.
So the testimonials reinforce that message of empowerment and peace of mind.
Exactly. They emphasize the accessibility. You don't need to be an expert. Just follow the instructions. It really pushes this idea that independence is within reach for ordinary folk.
So bringing this all together, what's the main takeaway for someone listening? We've gone from these dire warnings to a very specific DIY solution.
I think the core message presented is clear. Beyond the warnings, beyond the personal drama, there's this call to action towards self-sufficiency, towards resilience, finding peace through preparation.
Peace through preparation.
Yeah. The benefits claimed for this Joseph's Well system are, tapping into a supposedly unlimited water source, the air, almost no maintenance. And crucially, it supposedly gives you time in a crisis.
Time. How so?
Time not spent worrying about water is time you can spend protecting your family, praying, focusing on other needs. That's the idea. It even suggests you could become a pillar for your community, that man your church, look to when the storms come, referencing a passage from Isaiah about streams in the desert.
So it elevates preparedness from just personal survival to community support.
It does. It poses the question, really. When things get uncertain, how valuable is that peace of mind, knowing you can provide for that most basic need, water?
And the ultimate vision presented isn't about hiding away, is it?
No, exactly. It explicitly says this isn't about building a bunker and hiding. It's about being a well in the wilderness, a source of life when things are dry.
Being a builder, a provider. Like the Joseph narrative it references.
Right. The concluding thought is pretty profound. The ones who prepared will be the ones who provide. For their families, their neighbors, for what it calls the remnant.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to chew on. We've explored some really incredible claims, haven't we? And followed this very personal journey from potential crisis to, well, empowerment through ingenuity as it's presented.
It's quite a narrative, from mega drought warnings and these almost apocalyptic interpretations, right down to scavenging parts from a broken fridge to pull water from the air.
If we step back and think about the bigger picture here, this story of Joseph's Well, as presented, it isn't just about a piece of tech, is it? Or even just survival.
No, it seems to tap into something deeper, that fundamental human drive, maybe, to protect and provide. And it really highlights the choices people might face when uncertainty looms.
It definitely prompts you to consider what being prepared really means. Not just for some sudden crisis, maybe, but for a world that might be changing in fundamental ways.
What does that look like for you? For your community? It's a challenging question.
It really is. What insights stood out most to you as you listened? We definitely encourage you to reflect on how these ideas, this whole narrative, might resonate in your own life and your own context. Lots to think about.